again, and for the next talk, my pleasure to introduce Abele Michela, who will be talking on the topic of biofeedback. I don't know if you know about biofeedback, but it's a technique that actually allows you to learn how to control signals emanating from your body, so including like heart rate, skin conductance, and even brain signals. I find it fascinating because, you know, we hear about the stories about how people can, like yogis or monks, they can control their bodily signals. But actually, you can train regular people to do that, you know, using just a computer. So it's in a kind of a closed loop, and Abele will explain a little bit more how that works. But actually, our paths first crossed when I was doing my postdoc at the University of Geneva, and Abele was doing his master's. We were working in the same lab. And from then, Abele went on to do his PhD now at Radboud University, at the Institute for Behavioral Science. And actually, I think he was instrumental when we were working together to collect some data on neurofeedback that was we used later to secure a grant from the Lennart Foundation. So that was really nice, and I'm very pleased to welcome him in the lab at the CIBM in a few coming months after he completes his PhD defense. So thank you very much, Abele, for giving the talk, and the floor is yours.
Thank you for this opportunity. So just as a disclosure, I'm not going to talk about brain here. I'm going to focus on the heart. But I do think that, especially for neurofeedback projects, most of what I'm going to present here could actually be an interesting thing to maybe consider to implement in neurofeedback settings. So it all starts with what we call the police paradox. So in the Netherlands, but also here, we know that police officers have to deal with the type of stress that is quite uncommon in other sectors. If, for example, I was to take out a knife now and come toward you, most of the reaction you would have would be fight, flight, freeze, but there would be self-preservation things that reactions that actually are not matching very well with what we're asking police officers to do, because in these very threatening situations where we just want to survive, we're asking them to go there and act on a very calm and rational way, as the person with the knife, where they think is actually the best choice for their own life to come with a knife. So it's interesting because it's putting us, in a sense, in a biological paradox. Can we do something that is so deeply ingrained against our behavioral tendencies? So just to nail down a bit the point, I took this stuff from Geneva. I didn't remember what was presenting an EPF, but that's the number of high intensity, moderate, lower, and domestic violence. So all the interventions that have violence in the police intervention every year in Geneva. And you see that in 2001 and 2002, there's 2,800 cases of actual violence in police intervention that they have to either have against us, against them, or where they have to protect people from violence. So yeah, it's quite a difficult job. And if we look at how that high level of threat and stress is actually affecting them in terms of performance, what we see is, first of all, that their shooting accuracy can drop quite severely. So yeah, they have got right. They also make more decision-making errors. And if you train them to take decision under threat, it doesn't get better. They might use excessive use of force. That's something that is quite largely shown in the media, and so on and so forth. On the long run, however, there's also some important complaints that the police officer have to deal with. So first of all, they have a quite high prevalence of physical injuries, poor sleep quality, and their mental health is also at risk, with things like PTSD and depression being quite prevalent. And they also have a shorter life expectancy, and what's interesting is that it persists also after retirement. So how's the biology of this? How can we actually try to do something for them? And that could be also applied eventually to other first responders. So if we start by the physiology, the heart, I would say, we see that at rest, our heart is not a metronome. It usually oscillates, usually according to the respiration. It accelerates when you breathe in, accelerates when you breathe out, and you have your prefrontal lobe, which is quite irrigated and able to actually help you to make decisions. yeah, so you see with the respiration, it actually fluctuates. However, when you increase stress, threat, you have a heart rate increase, so this variability diminishes. And with the decreased variability, also the brain switches to other networks, and our prefrontal cortex is less usable. So what can we do with this? So the idea is that from heart rate variability, we can actually have an effect on behavior. So there's this is the neurovisceral model from Julian Thayer that shows how there's a connection between the heart rate and the brain, and we see also that for the behavior, it has an influence. But the core idea is that we want to calculate heart rate variability for this project. So how we calculate it, we just take the QRS complex, from the ECG reading, and this RP that you see over there is quite easy to spot. So it's easy to construct a line that actually takes all the R samples and look at the distance between the two, so that you can compute a heart rate. I'm just quickly going to connect the belt that I have with me so that you can see that happen live. And in the meantime, the presentation. So once you have that RR line that is computed, there's a lot of different computations that you can do. There's different ways of calculating the heart rate variability. Each one has its own benefits and drawbacks. The one that we used is called respiratory sinus arrhythmia. The idea is that your heart is, I think I can show you live, that the heart is not your metronome. So here you see my heart rate, that's the blue line over there. As you see, I'm quite stressed in this presentation because, yeah, it's my first time presenting this here. So my heart is racing and it's quite steady. Now you see that I'm trying to do some deep breathing. And because of this size, sometimes it works, sometimes not, because I'm stressed. But the idea is to create these fluctuations. And every time that a fluctuation is calculated, then we can increase the score. And that's the way we are calculating a heart rate variability. So let me just continue the presentation from here. The idea of RSA, which is respiratory sinus arrhythmia, is that your heart will beat faster to increase irrigation of the lungs when you're breathing in, and then when you breathe out, it's gonna slow down. This is actually a marker of vagal activity, so parasympathetic activity. It's quite interesting because it's not just a correlate. It's not, you saw that in the graph before, it was at the end of all the arrows coming from the brain, but actually what we see is that training heart rate variability with biofeedback, with the program that I showed you before, actually can increase the performance that people have in the breath. It also increases cognitive control, stress management, and most importantly for my case here, decision-making has been shown to be improved for military and police personnel in simulated scenarios, thanks to heart rate variability biofeedback. So how is heart rate variability biofeedback working? The idea is that we're taking some reading of the heart with the physiological sensors. Then you have a real-time data analysis that is plugged into a game, and then the game is fed back at the user. And more specifically, what we're doing here is a zombie shooter. I'm going to explain why in a bit. But basically, what we have is a police officer, and we look at their heart rate, and if we detect fluctuation, that's what you see in the lower graph is actually what I was trying to do just before, like breathing. Easier to do at home. So basically, when you have these fluctuations that are detected and you have a higher heart rate variability, then we increase the visibility of for the player in a VR environment, so that they actually have a feedback about the fact that they're doing a good thing in an arousing environment. The reason why we wanted to put heart rate variability in an action context is because heart rate variability is already trained as a mandatory part of police training in the Netherlands. But it's usually trained like this, in a very unarousing context. They just have a platysmal graph on the earlobe, so they should not move too much, and they look at a bar graph going up and down on screen. And this training is currently criticized because they say, okay, it's not arousing enough. You're asking us to do in the field in front of someone with a knife, something that we're just doing here sitting in a classroom. So a new type of training is actually needed, and that's what we went on trying to do. And it's also something that has been attempted several times in the past by one of the labs I was part of in the Netherlands, the GEM Lab, where they used neurofeedback and biofeedback to actually try to create game environments that help people to regulate at moments where it's actually needed. In both cases here, it's for anxiety. So building on that, we wanted to create a real-time biofeedback in an active action context with immersive stress and something engaging. We came up with this. Basically, it's a zombie shooter, so you can see, I think. So it's a dark garage, and the zombies coming at you. You cannot shoot at all the zombies, but only the one matching description that is given by a dispatch. And you have to basically perform as good as you can while trying to stay calm, because otherwise your vision is shrinking, giving you this feeling of tunnel effect that is very common for police officers. So by using this type of reward, this is not, I think, the same, we actually were able to train police officers, and I'm going to present here the main study of my PhD and the results that we had. So we did a training of 9 sessions. It's what you see here. You see that in this graph, that's actually 9 here on the bottom. These are different VR sessions that the players were doing on different days. Actually, it was in the span of 3 weeks. And the first biofeedback session was actually without presentation of biofeedback. There was no tunnel effect. So basically, they were just playing the zombie shooter. But they had a score at the end of how well they were doing in terms of heart rate variability. Then we gave them heart rate variability, so the tunnel effect while they were playing, and we see a huge increase in heart rate variability. Then we removed it again, and it goes down, up and down, until it's stabilizing after 9 sessions. We also tried to, in the first 2 sessions, change the order of the biofeedback administration. And we see that if for the first group we do no biofeedback, then no biofeedback, versus no biofeedback and only biofeedback in the 3rd session, we see that actually we can make causal claims about the fact that presenting biofeedback in an action context has an influence on the fact that their performance is improving. So it's not just correlation. We also importantly tested whether it transfers. So in a more realistic police situation where there was an armed robber matching a description, they had to decide whether to shoot him or not. And what we saw is that actually heart rate variability for the people that did the training was higher than non-trained controls in this transfer. And this, by the way, I think is the first, the extent of my knowledge, the first time that it is demonstrated that heart rate variability biofeedback in a VR environment actually transfers to a non-VR environment. Thanks to the fact that we're doing this on and off biofeedback, we will also check other things to have a more precise idea of what's going on. So we tested, for example, we asked at the end of every session about the physiological awareness that subject had about their heart and their breathing, and also their feeling of self-efficacy, so how much they felt that they could control their breathing, and their general degree of satisfaction. And what we see is that you see the graph in the middle, there's this on and off seesaw pattern that is there, which is basically showing that every time that biofeedback is presented, people tend to feel that they are less able to control their heart rate variability, which for us is a strong hint that biofeedback was presented in a very punitive way. So it was there to remind them, hey, you forgot to breathe. And if we look at that in conjunction with the fact that their awareness increases over time, we're quite confident about the fact that this increase in heart rate variability that we also see at transfer is actually something that is voluntarily done by the subjects. This basically just look at the fact that there's a lot of blue colors, so they find it useful, efficient, and engaging. And what's important is that the population we were testing here were police trainers. Because it was COVID, students were not available, but it was quite a good opportunity for us because we were testing the trainers in a training that they were meant to use with police police students then. In terms of behavioral result, although the focus for us was on physiology, we also saw that there was some increase that we could sadly not relate to physiology, but it means that behavior can actually improve also if you're focusing on just training physiology. In terms of perception, also 80% of the police trainers wanted to incorporate this type of training in their own practice of teaching for police students, which is quite a staggering result. And also 60% of them, people that are supposed to train students to be calm in the field, were actually feeling that they learned something in terms of breathing control and stress management in action, thanks to this program. And for me, the most important result This is a stage picture, but I just surprised them doing that. So we were shown scores at the end of every game session, and this is two police trainers that basically were sneakingly taking a picture of their score because they wanted to compare it with one another. So I think this really shows that we can have a very high engagement, even in a population that is quite reluctant usually, thanks to the fact that we created this more gaming dimension to the training. So if I quickly summarize the findings, we saw that it's engaging in an effective way of voluntarily upregulating HRD, that physiological awareness increases, that there's a transfer, this is a very important point, in VR situations, that also experienced trainers benefit from this training, so it showed that this training is something new that traditional technique cannot do. And then we showed that behavioral performance improved even if the focus is not on physiology, and 80% of the training really like it. I nailed the point not too much of so. In terms of the future of this, that's the name of the game, actually it's being redeveloped now as a more standalone unit that can be then deployed in the training of police officers. And the piloting is starting about as we speak. So police officers in the Netherlands are starting to be trained with these techniques. I would like to thank all the amazing team that I had to work on this, and also the institution that financed us, and very importantly, the game designers, because it's not us coding that we could have come up with a game like this. Now, if you have questions, let's start. I just realized that since my presentation is now ended, I think that my heart really got a bit. That's a good sign. Yes.
Do you have maybe an idea of, thanks for the nice presentation, very cool, of the persistency of these effects in the future, like even when they're not doing the
Yes.
VR training?
I have two things that I can say about it. So how much it lasts, basically. There's another group that tested providing a biofeedback training not online, just in a classroom setup. And what they saw is that they could see up to 18 months after still an effect. And very anecdotally, we went to the same police center for 2 different studies, and I tested 2 participants at random that already did the first training in the new environment. And we saw that actually they kept having a very high score, as if they had done it a lot. And yeah, as I said, here we just tested the fact that we changed physiology and we could prove that physiology changes, but other people already showed that this kind of training has impact on the game. And our task was not designed for that. We just really wanted to nail down this more against that. Any question online?
Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
What was do you have any feedback on why some did not want to implement this into their training?
Yes, so not everyone is training feeling control. Some people are training more like juridical aspect of policing, for example, so they're less interested. That's the first thing. And the second thing is that the game dimension is not really appreciated by some of the officers because they feel that it's not, how to say that, it's not the way they are seeing their work. They see it as a very tough, important thing. So putting a game dimension there actually is not in line with their values. We're really trying to show that this game is about taking a part of their work and training that little thing in isolation. And that game was actually a good way to make sure that police students are not feeling bad in terms of professional self-efficacy, which is very important and strong in police officer. If I'm not good at the training, I'm a bad cop. If I'm a bad cop, why am I here? So making it as a game was helping them to train in a safer way, but not everyone felt it.
Any particular reason why you use zombies?
Yes, actually, I had a slide as a backup in case people were asking about why not using it realistically. I would say that the main thing for me is ethics. I don't want people to have to shoot or not missile people in training. And actually, that was one of the things that the police departments were quite clear about. No shooting innocent in training because it can create trauma just as good as real. Yes.
Thank you for the nice presentation. It's maybe something kept secret, but I wanted to know if you had some other contacts, like with the military troops, because I mean there are many stressful situations to face there. And I was maybe thinking, it could be also applied for civil situations like pilots. So I have heard that like military pilots landing on aircraft carriers could have even their heart stopping to beat for 2-3 seconds before they land. So is it a planning of project?
Well, I didn't know about the pilot thing. I really learned that. Yes, of course, it could be deployed for them. We had a connection originally with the police, so that's the reason why we developed it there. But since it's gamified and it's quite distant from the actual police work, with very small changes in the way the dispatch, for example, is given, it could become very usable for a military context. Actually, I would love to see that implemented also in the military. Absolutely. And other type of first responders. So, for example, ambulance personnel, also paramedics. Many of those people could use it because it's, in a sense, it's a soft skill. It's quite transversal, and being able to stay calm in the moment of action is useful for everyone, not just for police officers.
Thanks for the presentation. I was wondering if you were planning, or if this would be an interesting idea to give access at any time, maybe at home, for the heart rate variability software and the band without the VR environment, for training someone like constantly and having this experience of getting this somatic feedback.
So that would absolutely be a good option for making the training more thorough, I think. And you just work with the polar belt here, and the program is actually there's one version that is not very well implemented, but there's one version that is already freely available online. So you could share that with you if you're interested. And the band is just like $80 or something like that. So, yeah, the idea for us, I think that the program was already used also by people that were implementing some hacked medical equipment for military theater. So it has been used out there. And absolutely, yeah, training. In that vein, we're also trying to develop a standalone VR unit that doesn't require a computer or a trainer in presence, so that people could take the whole package home and do that.
Okay, any more questions?
Thank you very much for your attention.